I think there's a lot of commentary about science fiction today where, especially in the US, it feels more dystopian.
Sure.
Do you think that's an issue going forward for, entrepreneurs like yourself, where, you're inspired constantly by kind of all these science fiction ideas?
In general, it's bad when a society turns Luddite. When they start to demonize new things. And it goes back and forth. There's always people who have fought in the moment, and very few who fight to go back after the fact.
Cool, so let's get started. So Palmer, thank you for coming today, and thank you for letting us come to the Anduril offices.
Of course, happy to have you here.
It's one of my dream come trues to come here. Obviously, I learned about you through Oculus and that side, but I think the Anduril side was something very new for me. I learned about it, I think it was in 2021 during the All-In Summit. Obviously, a lot of people think of the All-In Summit and you with the whole thing with Jason, but I think I was really awestruck by your speech.
It was a good talk, right?
It was an amazing
I didn't
talk.
just show up to make fun of Jason.
Yeah.
I showed up with a good talk, and then I unloaded it on him for treating me so poorly.
Yeah, but it was so surprising to me because obviously when I thought about the U.S. and especially in the defense side, it was like advanced military capabilities, but it wasn't as I thought. Especially in the side of AI, especially kind of mixing this hardware and software side. There was a lot of issues. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the overall kind of issues around that first?
Sure. I mean, different countries have different views on, I think, what arms are for, and some of them see them in a largely offensive light because you look at Russia, to a lesser extent China, where they're seeing their military primarily as a force that is to expand their territorial holdings. And then you have other countries, Switzerland is a classic example that's very defensively postured. They're trying to hold on to what they've got, turn themselves into a prickly porcupine. And then the United States has been in a very interesting position because we have basically had the rest of the world outsource responsibility for the national security to the United States through security guarantees. And so it's been very interesting to see a lot of the backlash or unwillingness to engage with companies like Anduril is coming from companies that are only able to have effectively no military presence on the backs of the United States promising that we'll be there for them. And then they forget that these were deals that they cut with us explicitly for that purpose. And so it's very easy for them to say, wow, you're so horrible for making weapons. Our country doesn't, focus on that. So, well, you don't focus on it because I do.
Right.
And so it's a very interesting split where people from different cultures have different views. And I think sometimes they're reasonable and often they're not. But my view is that weapons are just one tool that you have to try to achieve geopolitical outcomes. And sometimes they can be used ethically, sometimes they can be used unethically, but the same is true of economic tools. There's ethical ways to use those and unethical ways. It's the same as, for example, information control, or psychological warfare campaigns, political sabotage. There's ethical examples and unethical examples. And many times, the existence of force as an option actually makes diplomatic solutions to international problems much more likely. If you don't have that threat of credible violence, let's say, underpinning what will happen if they were to invade you, it's much harder to negotiate a better outcome. So I'm personally a big fan of looking at these problems in a very big picture sense and saying, okay, are my actions in general ethical? Like I would say, if you're China looking at invading Taiwan potentially, I think you could say, well, whether that happens through arms or political sabotage or some other means, it's a problem. Right. And, I think it's the same for problems around the world.
Yeah. No, I think at the end of the day, it's a technology, and technology can be used in good ways and bad ways.
People can use anything. Right. It's technology, but I mean art. Art can be used for bad purposes as well. Right. Not to make everything about Adolf Hitler, but Adolf Hitler understood this very, very well. He was a huge proponent of state funding of art programs for exporting their ideas and propaganda around the world. The modern condenser microphone was pushed forward by huge research grants by Adolf Hitler personally to Sennheiser Corporation to develop it, like because he knew that their propaganda would have better audio quality and voice quality than anything that the West made. It was just a very fascinating. It's very fascinating to look at history and realize anything can be used for good or for ill. It's about what you do with it.
Got it. So we're here now at the Anduril offices, which is a beautiful campus, by the way. Like,
thank you.
I didn't realize how big it was.
Well, it used to be the New York Times printing press for,
Really?
or sorry, not New York Times, Los Angeles Times printing press. Sorry, I misspoke. The LA Times used to print their newspaper here, and so I like to say that the building's finally doing some good.
Well, I think let's get into a little bit more about Anduril, kind of the founding story, and I think I remember in a podcast. I don't think it was you talking about it, but I think it was Stefan's talking when you guys first met, and to talk about this idea. You had like a jet engine you're like building in your pool. Is that something you just like you're just kind of like tinker around with, and then the Anduril idea came up? Or
well, I mean I'd been concerned about the United States losing its lead in defense technology for a long time, and I had actually previously worked on an Army affiliate research center program called BraveMind, which is using virtual reality exposure therapy to treat veterans with PTSD, and that was where I first got exposure to people working on these types of problems. And I realized that the United States was falling behind relative to our adversaries. And then combine that with the fact that so much of our technology industry was refusing to work with our government, sometimes on ethical grounds, but often because they just didn't want to upset China, which was sometimes their largest investor or their largest market or their largest manufacturing partner. And especially my company was acquired by Facebook, and we went through many of these exact same challenges. And so I had been thinking about this problem for a long time, and I'd been looking for companies that I could invest in. Now I was interested in this, so me and my buddies were building jet engines at our house in Atherton, and then Woodside. But we weren't really seriously thinking about solving it ourselves. We were looking for companies that we could invest in that would solve these problems. And then one day, well, a few things happened. First, so Trey, you mentioned earlier, he was at the time working full time as a venture capitalist at Founders Fund, and he met with hundreds of companies trying to find the next great defense company.
Right.
And they didn't make a single investment. They couldn't find anything that seemed to have any chance of actually achieving scale that would be meaningful. And so Trey had several times said, "Oh, Palmer, we should start a company together." And I had told him, "Well, I'm running Oculus, and I'm, I love VR. I'm having a great time." But then in 2016, I gave $9,000 to the wrong political campaign, and was put on leave by Facebook. And then they decided they didn't need me around anymore. And so the moment they fired me, I called up Trey and I called up Brian and a few of my other co-founders. And I said, "Hey guys, it's time for us to build the company that we've been looking for." We've been trying to find somebody else who's going to do this. We're going to have to do it ourselves.
The flame of the West.
Exactly. And defending these Western style values of self-determination and freedom of speech, freedom of association. And Trey said, "Oh, but Palmer, what about Oculus?" I said, "Oh, that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make." And that was really how it all came together in the beginning. It was doing something we known needed to be done for many years. But we didn't really know that we were necessarily going to end up being the people to do it.
Got it. And then I think one of the really interesting things about Anduril that I observed, one, you have a portfolio of different products, right? And just to kind of talk through some of
hardware and software products.
Hardware and software, right? And so Ghost, Anvil, Sentry Towers, Menace, Wisp, Dive LD, Roadrunner, Solid Motor Rockets, Altius, and others. But I think one of the really unique things about Anduril that maybe other defense companies don't have is that it all ties together in an operating system layer, right? With Lattice. Can you talk a little bit about, was that kind of planned from the start? Like what was the strategy there?
So yeah, I mean the strategy was to build Lattice, this AI engine that powers all the things that we build, as kind of the common platform that we could build many hardware products on top of. And the thing about building a software platform is that, unlike hardware, each incremental copy is free, and improvements that you make can proliferate for free across to all of the systems that use it.
Right.
And so if I build a software platform that's used by a dozen or 24 different systems, and I make an update that makes, if I put $1 into making my, sensor algorithm better, that could make 24 different products better. I basically multiply that dollar by 24.
Right.
Very hard to do that with hardware. If I make an improvement to hardware, it's probably trapped inside of that one program, or maybe one or two other programs that are similar. And so you get this multiplicative effect through investing in software. And I'm a hardware guy at heart. That's really what I'm into. But in the Oculus days, it was the same thing. Our mantra was to do in hardware only what you could not do in software. It was like rather than trying to build lenses that were very low distortion, we just corrected for distortion in software in real time, and that made for a larger load on the GPU, but only a small one, and it allowed you to make the hardware much cheaper. And we were able to use cheaper sensors because we had really, really good sensor fusion algorithms and filtering algorithms. And it was one of those things where that was when I realized that you want to start by investing in software to push it as far as you can. And the other nice thing about investing in software as a platform is the larger your company gets, the more the gains scale. Like, let's say that I make all these investments in software as a platform and I only have one hardware product. Well, then I'm not getting any real gain at all.
Right.
If I have 2 products, maybe I get some gain. But what if I have 1,000 products?
Right.
Well, now every dollar I put in, the impact is multiplied by 1,000. And so if you can build products where they're kind of software defined but enabled by hardware, where hardware is not necessarily the differentiating factor, it's just it's a way to deliver software defined capability, you can move much more quickly. And that's how Anduril has been able to build over 24 hardware products in just a few years. It's because of this common platform.
And how does the organization work then? Because oftentimes you have hardware experts and maybe software experts, but oftentimes you don't have both, right? How does Anduril kind of figure the organization out there?
Sure. So I think it's both. It's both, and there's people who are experts in both. The good news about Anduril is that we have been able to hire from a lot of people in not just traditional military and defense industrial companies, but hiring from traditional tech companies, hiring from even other startups. We have a lot of people from SpaceX, a lot of people from Google, even some people from Facebook and Meta. And a lot of the people that we hire are the ones that do have experience with hardware and software.
Got it.
I mean, like one of the smartest people alive is John Carmack, who lives at that kind of intersection of hardware and software, creator of basically modern 3D gaming, but not just on the software side, but deeply understands how the hardware works that makes his stuff work. And that's kind of the mold of person that we try to find. Now, nobody's as smart as John Carmack, not me either, but that's kind of the ideal mold, is someone who even if they're going to work on software every day, they do have an understanding of what the hardware people are doing and vice versa.
Got it. And then to talk a little...
for example, I'm a very, very poor software engineer.
Really?
Oh yeah, and I'm a hardware guy, but I understand software well enough. I did a little bit of dabbling when I was younger, and that's made a huge difference, I think, in my career as well.
So understanding kind of both sides.
Understanding both sides at least a little bit, and especially understanding it well enough to know what you're bad at.
Right, and I guess having at least some interest in it as well, right? To be able to actually.
Well, yeah. So that's not just a totally foreign concept to you. Yeah, I highly recommend that anyone who's actually trying to build products that incorporate hardware and software to take time to understand both sides.
Makes sense. One thing I really want to get your thoughts about was in a different podcast. I think one of the Anduril employees mentioned when they were building Copperhead, which is a torpedo essentially, and you at the very beginning told the team to make it into like a square shape.
Yep.
And that I think seemed pretty foreign for a lot of people, but at the end of the day, it was the right design. What was kind of like the thought process behind that? Like, did you already kind of know beforehand?
I've been thinking about it quite a bit. Okay. I mean, it boiled down to, even within the team, a lot of people were thinking, well, you're building a thing that looks a lot like a torpedo. It should be shaped like a torpedo. But the reality, you have to remember that that form is guided by function, and you have to ask yourself, well, why do torpedoes look the way that they do? And the answer is because that's what a torpedo tube looks like. Like the torpedo tube used to move weapons from the inside of a submarine at one pressure level to the outside. have to be able to resist an enormous amount of pressure. And it turns out a cylinder is the best way to resist an enormous amount of pressure. And so they then built the largest weapons you could fit into those tubes. But for the way we were deploying them, we don't need to go from an internal ambient low pressure environment. So ours are always at pressure, always flooded. And so you don't need a strong tube to launch from. And so the thing is, tubes are actually not a very dense shape to pack a lot of stuff in. Like if you have, think about it like soda cans versus juice boxes. With juice boxes, you can pack them, right next to each other, right up to each other with no airspace, and have a huge block of very dense juice. And with bottles, you have a lot of airspace, and so it's actually an identical problem.
Interesting.
And so a lot of people have been building circular vehicles because they say, well, I'm building these small UAVs, it should be circular. And my point was, guys, we can pack way more into the same volume if we make it into a packable shape. And on top of that, a lot of the things that we also want to pack inside of the vehicle themselves are rectangular. So if I want to pack a bunch of batteries into one of these, I can pack a lot more into a rectangular shape than I can into a cylindrical shape. And so it ends up just being actually an optimal shape. And there are certain hydrodynamic advantages as well, where parts you basically can treat it, the whole thing as a maneuvering or lifting surface more reliably. But yeah, mostly it was the packing. The packing improvements were huge.
Got it. And then shifting gears a little bit towards ModRetro and Chromatic. You founded ModRetro. It was originally a community. I think you ran over 10 years ago?
Oh, even more. No, we started it in 2009, early 2009.
Okay.
So that would have been, I guess, how many years now?
15, 16 years ago?
17? Yes, 17, 16 years.
16 years ago, yeah.
16 years ago, wow. But yeah, no, I started that when I was a kid, and I started that with my friend Chris Dykus, who was also employee number 1 at Oculus, and then employee number 1 at Anduril. So it's funny how that works. Yeah, ModRetro, it was an online community, and it's still around. It's still going, but going strong. But ModRetro started as a community for people who wanted to combine retro game consoles with modern technology. So building portable Nintendo 64s, modifying Game Boys with modern display upgrades, building MP3 players into cassette tapes, and cassette tape. It's funny, that's a product you can just buy now. You can just buy a cassette tape that you can put in your old car that plays cassette tapes, and it plays MP3s. As far as I know, the first person to ever build something like that was a guy on ModRetro.
Wow.
Yeah. So I guess some Chinese factory saw that and realized, it got a bunch of coverage on Engadget and a bunch of other sites back in 2010. And then some factory in China decided to turn it into a real product, and they made a lot more money than any of us did. But I think all of us had this idea of trying to build new things with old technology and really build things the way that we wanted them to be. And in the case of a lot of the mods we were doing for Game Boys, it was what would be the ultimate version of this? What if costs were no object, and I could make a case out of metal instead of plastic, and I'm going to make screen lens out of glass instead of plastic, and that kind of, we had this project that started almost 15 years ago to do a knockoff of the Game Boy.
Oh, really?
And so we started on it so long ago, and it just went on for years and years and years, and actually we finally just released the results of that, the ModRetro Chromatic, which is basically an heirloom grade Game Boy Color. So
it's incredible.
Magnesium shell, sapphire screen lens. It is. It's everything you would do if you were trying to make the Game Boy as the ultimate tribute to the Game Boy rather than a mass manufacturable consumer product.
Right.
And one of the things that I it's like, what would you make if it were made with money is no object? This is something that you want to pass down to your kids. And I think we've done a pretty good job. I don't think anyone's going to make something better than the Chromatic, at least as far as the Game Boy Color goes.
And I think in addition to that, now you're working with a lot of game developers that maybe ran out of budget, or they weren't able to release in time, their version of the Game Boy kind of whatever game they were building. And now you're working with them to kind of not re-release it, but newly release.
We've done some re-releases, we've done some new games, but what you're talking about is, I think, the coolest category. It's there are games where they were developed and then maybe they weren't finished, or maybe they were just never launched. There's a few that were also launched technically, but they had a very small manufacturing run and then just never actually got properly marketed. But yeah, like taking these games that never got released and putting them out there is I think one of the most interesting things of all.
That's so cool.
You know, we've mostly been working with smaller developers that have been doing this, but we've been starting to talk to larger game developers, including in Japan.
Oh wow!
And they've, you know, like, I mean, this is like one we're not working on right now, but like for me, kind of like the white whale of this would be like Pokemon Pink, which was mentioned one time in one interview ever. And there are still stubs in the code that refer to it. It was going to be a companion game to Pokemon Yellow, most likely, but it never came out. And like there's a lot of stuff like that in the games industry where it'd be so cool if it could come out. You know, now that we're it's past the point of commercial viability, but it'd just be a cool piece of history for things like that to come out.
Definitely. So you started off with the Game Boy.
Yeah.
Is, you know, as much as you're willing to kind of disclose, are kind of different types of devices coming up next, or what's kind of the plan with ModRetro going forward?
We've got a whole bunch of things in the works. Most of them gaming related, a few just more in the consumer electronics space. Like it's the same idea. You know, what would some, you know, like with the Chromatic, the goal wasn't to replicate the experience of using a Game Boy Color. It was to replicate the experience of what you felt like using Game Boy Color as a kid. It's how it's to replicate today how you remember feeling back then, which is very, very different. And so we're applying that to lots of other things. So like, I mean, I've hinted at it, but I've practically admitted that we're doing Nintendo 64 next. We're definitely going to do a Game Boy Advance at some point. I figured out a new way to make new CRTs. People have said that long said it's impossible to do in low volume. I figured out a new way to build modern scanning ray tube displays. It's a bit of a novel one. It's not a pure CRT, but it will have identical visual characteristics. I call it a quantum ray tube, so a QRT. But we're looking at doing that because the displays that these games were designed for are totally different in their mechanism than modern displays. And so if you really want to authentically recreate them, you can't just, you know, like with the Chromatic, we made a custom display that was exactly the same resolution, the same subpixel structure, the same color temperature as the Game Boy Color. And so if we're going to do that for console games, well, you have to make a display that can do it. And so we got a whole bunch of stuff in the pipe. But everything we put out, we want it to kind of be heirloom grade tribute to the thing that it is based on.
And I love kind of how you described it. It's not just to replicate; it's to replicate the feeling.
That's right. Because you actually give you a Game Boy Color today, and you naturally compare it to things you have. You're like, oh my God, it's so dim. I can barely see it. This is actually really cheap. But that's not how you felt when you were a kid, and not in comparison to technology. You need it's a very, very fine line to walk. How do you authentically update it without trying to fully modernize it? And it's I think we did just about as good as you could do with the Chromatic.
I mean, it reminds me of like the Ratatouille scene, right, where he takes the bite of the Ratatouille and he goes back to his past and he kind of remembers it. So I'm guessing it's something like that. And I think so you have ModRetro and you have Anduril. Working on multiple companies is very, very hard. Not a lot of people can do it.
To be honest, it is true. And people have often asked why I'm not like, why are you not like Elon Musk? And you have like 3 or 4 or 5 companies. I'll admit, I spend 95% of my time on Anduril. I think it's where I'm having the most impact in the world by far. I got into it for a reason. And the reason that this Game Boy project took so long is because I've always prioritized other things. The difference is now that I have, in just the last couple of years, brought in other people to help me make sure that ModRetro stays on the rails. So like you've met Torin.
You have the right team around it.
And Torin's another guy where I have worked with him at Oculus. And then he came to work at Anduril. And then he's running ModRetro now. And so he's going to make sure that what took 15 years on the Game Boy side is going to take us a year on the Nintendo 64 side. And I think that I don't want to say I don't put any time into it. The time I put in, I think, is very high impact. But it also does help that what we're doing is on the tail end of a couple decades of plotting out exactly what would be done. So it's not, we're not sitting around wondering how would you build the ultimate Game Boy? Well, we figured that out 15 years ago on the ModRetro forums. We all agreed what it would be. It just took this long to finally do it. All the other stuff, we just got to, like, I know what the perfect N64 is.
You just have to go and execute it.
I just need to execute it now. And I know what the perfect CRT replacement is now. I just got to go execute it.
And then now kind of switching topics again, you mentioned on a previous, I think, podcast about kind of the role of science fiction and how a lot of the ideas that we have aren't new. They're all kind of written in science fiction, and obviously science fiction writers have an advantage because they don't have to actually
make any of this stuff. They just need to think about it. And well, I mean, it's the difference between saying, and then they built a spaceship and they went to Mars and actually built, but that freedom to kind of do anything in fiction means that they're often able to explore ideas long before they're technologically viable. And also to explore what the social impacts would be, the societal impacts, the geopolitical impacts. And I've often said that nothing that I've ever made is a new idea. Even things where I thought it was new and I thought nobody had ever come up with it, it turns out that when you dig into it, there's at least one, usually dozens of science fiction authors who've had literally the exact same idea.
Do you think, I think there's a lot of commentary about science fiction today where, especially in the US, it feels more dystopian. Right? Do you think that's an issue going forward for, entrepreneurs like yourself where, you're inspired constantly by kind of all these science fiction ideas?
I do. I think maybe it doesn't impact, like my investors don't have a dystopian view. And, so that's fine. And my employees don't really have too dystopian view, but I think in general, it's bad when a society turns Luddite, when they start to demonize new things. And it goes back and forth, but the thing you gotta remember is there's always people who have fought in the moment and very few who fight to go back after the fact. How many people, like right now, people are saying, oh my God, AI is gonna ruin everything. How many people said the same thing about automated manufacturing? The reality is that it actually made cars from a plaything for the rich into something that anybody can do. There were people who said that that air travel going from being this thing for wealthy people, like, oh my God, it's like a bus, it's so horrible and unidentified. Okay, but it's also connected the entire world and allowed you to move around to wherever economic opportunity is and still stay connected with your family and friends. And then how many people even complained about digitization of music? I mean, and I don't mean like MP3s. I mean literally like non-live music. There were people who are very against recorded music. They said this ruins it. It cheapens a performance if you can replicate it for free. And of course, I think very few people in the music industry today would say, no, let's go back to a world where the only audience for my music is the people literally sitting around me in a circle. And it was actually the same for photography. There were artists who believed that photography would kill painting and art and illustration. And of course, it didn't do those things. It actually enhanced them and it created its own new art form. And so I feel like agriculture, transportation, energy, always, I feel like we're unfortunately in one of those swings where everyone is questioning whether technology will make our future better. And I think it's especially unfortunate because we're on the precipice of so many things that have been scarce becoming unscarce. And things that have been unobtainable for so many to instead become mass market commodities. And I'm personally a huge fan of it. We just got to get through it.
I mean, completely.
But it's really all about vibes. Like the thing is, it's hard to be like, well, what can Palmer, what can we do to convince people? And usually the thing you have to do is not talk about it really good. You just have to do it really good until it becomes inarguable. Like imagine if instead of making photography into an art, they had just argued about it on podcasts with painters. It would never work. You have to just do it, and then eventually everyone realized you were right all along. And
you have to get adoption, and once you get enough adoption, then it just becomes the norm.
And that's especially, like, it's true with the public, but it's especially true with experts. One of my favorite examples is, I might get the timeline just barely wrong. So it was, I want to say it was 3 weeks. No, I'll give it away at the end. So the New York Times wrote a story from their editorial board, and it was in response to rumors that flying machines were being built by these wacky garage inventors. And they said, we want to be clear, this is a folly, it's never going to work. And the best line is, they said, perhaps by the combined efforts of every scientist and engineer on Earth working for millions of years, a flying machine could be constructed, but even then it would be of no use. And I think it was 3 weeks later that the Wright brothers made their first powered flight. And of course, look where things are now. And it's just, you imagine if the Wright brothers had, instead of building their flying machine, had gone to argue with this guy, right? You just, at some point you have to say, you know what, they're just wrong about our future, and we just need to build that future, and they'll get there when they get there.
Yeah, no, this happens every single time. I remember when like there's a newsletter called, I think, Pessimist Archives, and they kind of like document all of this when like bicycles came out. Like people are saying like, oh, like people use it to like cheat on each other, and this is terrible for society, and like, all these different things, right?
You know, I've been pondering 2 ideas along these lines. Are you familiar with Hereticon?
No.
It's a conference for heretics and heretical ideas. And the funny thing is, a lot of them, the things that were like, if I told you what was in like 2 years ago on their agenda, it's like, oh yeah, they were talking like nuclear power and about how we need to have digital currencies, like state digital currencies, and like it's stuff that was heretical. It's like there's now literally multiple nations that have adopted it. Like, so it's one of those things where people are like, I thought was like, wow, Hereticon's gotten a lot more heretical over time. I said, no, you're wrong. It's just their ideas became mainstream. Anyway, I've been thinking, been chatting with the organizers, and I've been thinking about giving a talk. I gave a talk 2 years ago about why the Na'vi from the Avatar series were self-defeatist and unethical, even by their own moral standards. They're not like humans, but I mean, by their own moral standards, their own laws and ways, here's why they're acting unethically. Anyway, we won't get into that, but I've been thinking about giving a talk from the perspective, I was looking up talks that were given by people who had their jobs automated away in the textiles industry. And I was just going to give a talk, and I'm like, today I'm going to be talking about how spinning machines are going to destroy American agriculture, and just give their talk. And of course, it'd be so funny. And I've been thinking also in hindsight, I've kind of thinking another one might be to give. So Al Gore did his movie, An Inconvenient Truth, but he also did a TED Talk called An Inconvenient Truth, and then he made the movie. I've been thinking of just giving that talk. Hi, my name is Vice President Al Gore, and Los Angeles is going to be underwater by 2020. And I think it'd be so funny. It's so fun to revisit these things. Not often enough are they revisited.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, we'll talk sometime about like the media side about that. Nobody fact checks themselves. So
when I was a journalism major before I dropped out, it's worth noting. So I was the online editor of the Daily 49er at Cal State Long Beach. So I do care about this stuff, not just as an outside observer. There was a time where I was going to be a journalist, so I do care about it.
So last topic. We'll talk a little about Japan and anime.
Hell yeah.
So one of the really cool things with Anduril is some of your trailer videos for some of your products is like anime style, right?
Yep.
That's awesome, by the way.
Thank you.
I don't think any kind of Western company has really done that, and we've done it really well. Has there been any kind of inspiration from like anime? Like obviously there's like a lot of military, stuff like mecha stuff.
Yep.
Any inspiration there? And then let's start there.
I mean, for sure. I mean, I grew up watching anime. First whatever was slopped in front of me on the TV, and
do you remember?
Well, I grew up with everything that made it on to like Toonami and Kids WB,
Dragon Ball Z.
Exactly, exactly. Lots of Dragon Ball and Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, and so yeah, whatever got slopped in front of me, and then when I was a teenager, like I started watching the good shit.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with Pokemon. There's nothing wrong with Dragon Ball. Like Code Geass is probably my all-time favorite. And then, of course, in the Oculus days, I spent a lot of time in Japan because so many of the developers we worked with, game developers, were from Japan. And definitely a lot of inspiration from anime and manga and light novels for some of the stuff we do. The reason that we do the anime videos is actually, it's downstream of a different decision. Anduril has never released a render of a product. If you're like, you can go and, it's not strictly true. There was one time that we had to put one render in a press release because the government of a certain country wanted to show it before it was real. But anyway, there was one time. Other than that one time where we were truly forced to, we've never put out a render. And that was because from the very beginning of the company, I made a declarative statement. We are only going to show things that are real. If it's on our website, we're going to show it the real thing, doing the real mission. And if it's not real yet, we don't deserve to be showing it. And the other cool thing about that is while everyone else is out there showing renders and diagrams, concept videos, and those get brought up in all their media coverage, it gets brought up in all their stories. If you go to a story, even a press story, even one that's negative about Anduril, and they'll try to write a story sometimes like, oh, Anduril stuff isn't real enough, and people are questioning if it's going to work. But guess what? All the pictures in that story, even the one where they're trying to make us look bad, it's all videos of our stuff actually doing things for real as live artifacts on military test ranges and exercise. So, like, it's very hard. Like, Anduril's not a real company. Here's a bunch of pictures of their working products, and I think that's worked really well for us. And so now there came a time where we needed to be able to illustrate some of these capabilities that were not actually possible. Like, for example, we recently released a video showing Copperhead. Showing videos of a bunch of swarming underwater systems is actually very hard to do. Like, the water visibility literally isn't good enough. And so you need a way to illustrate ideas like synchronized autonomous systems over large distances underwater working together.
Got it.
And I refused to do renders or fakes. I said, I'm down to do highly stylized stuff. Like, I'm down to do a sketch of something that we put on our website, but it can't look at all real. And that was actually how we ended up doing so many anime videos. We do these anime videos because it's explicitly clear, hey, this is a stylized representation of something real. That said, these are real things. But if we're not gonna show real photos, real videos, then it has to be extremely stylized. And so it also helps that, of course, it's not that expensive to make.
Got it.
I mean, it's always astounding to the production costs of Japanese anime versus like Western live action media. Like, do you know how much each episode of She-Hulk cost? The Marvel series, live action? Make a guess.
Like a few $100,000, million.
All right, so for the audience, it's worth knowing, like, the cost of producing a season of an anime can easily cost you $2 million to 3, 4, 5 million. Your single-digit millions is, of course, there's exceptions. There's times where they spend more. Like, single-digit millions is a reasonable thing for a season of an anime. She-Hulk was $30 million per episode.
Per episode?
Per episode.
Wow. That's insane.
And then Game of Thrones had one episode that cost $80 million. Most of them did not, but one of them did. And it's just like, that's one of the cool things about anime is because the production costs are so low, it means that you can make things for niche audiences. You don't have to make slop that appeals to everyone. Because when you make something for everyone, you often make something that's for nobody. And I love things that are for somebody, even if it's just this very narrow little slice of the world. Because I'm often that narrow slice of the world. Are you watching any good anime this season?
I haven't found anything that I'm like super like gung ho about. Have you?
Well, I mean, we're kind of between seasons right now. But like last season, I watched the Sword Art Online spin-off Gun Gale Online season 2. I have a Gun Gale Online wrapped car, so I have a little.
Awesome.
I have a Mazda Speed AZ1 Itasha. I also converted it from gas power to electric power. So like Lenchan, it's really fast. It's got 670 horsepower in a 1,800-pound car.
That's insane.
Little tiny go-kart. It's great. But then last season I watched The 100 Girlfriends Who Really Love You.
I don't know that one. No.
It's harem comedy anime, really great. A guy has to date 100 women at the same time or they're going to die. And of course, it's very difficult. The gods messed up, and now he has to do it, or due to supernatural reasons, they're all going to die of broken heart. So he has to keep them all happy. And then this season, I'm watching. Okay, have you seen Solo Leveling?
Yes.
I just started. I just started it because everyone's been telling me to watch, and season 2 I guess just ended, so I'm catching up on Solo Leveling.
Anime or manga, by the way?
I'm watching the anime. I like to consume manga when I can, but the thing is, so me and my wife usually like watch anime together every weekend. Like we block out some time. Saturday is Anna Day, and we watch some anime. And so it's a lot easier if we can have something that we can watch together, even while she might have to like be folding the laundry. So it's just it's a bit like that. And then I'm also watching a comedy anime called I Just Married the Girl That I Hate. And it's about a guy who is forced by his grandparents to marry a girl while he's in high school, or he will not inherit the global electronics empire that his grandfather has built. And of course, comedy ensues, and you got the classic enemies to lovers, to enemies to lovers dynamic. So I watch it all. I watch crappy harem bullshit. I watch action anime. I watch the intellectual pieces.
Awesome. Well, Palmer, we're out of time. Like there's like a billion other questions I want to ask you, but I know you're super busy. You have to run. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, and thank you for the help that you've given ModRetro already. You know,
of course.
It's one of those things where I don't take it for granted, but it is so interesting that it's something where people see it and their first response is like, oh my God, how can I make more of this happen? Like, how can I have more of this type of stuff?
We need you to come to Japan.
So you know, I'm going to be headed back probably this September.
Oh, nice.
I used to go to Japan 3 or 4 times a year, if you can believe it. It was so great. I got to go all the time for Oculus. But then once I started Anduril, I can only go when I kind of go for fun. I have spent the last 2 New Years in Japan.
Okay.
So that was fun. Last year I was in Hokkaido, and that was really fun. And then oh shoot, what's it called?
Niseko or
no? What's the New Year's Day show or New Year's night show?
Oh, the Kohaku.
Kokohaku.
Kohaku, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the singing competition.
So if you or anyone knows a way for a white gaijin like me to go, let me know, because I've been trying to go for years, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, Palmer-san. Oh, it's only for very special people. I'm like, oh, come on, I'm special. So yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna have to try to get you. So anyone listening,
I watch it on TV every year.
Really?
It was
so funny.
Was it 2 years ago that they had the Sapporo Ham Fighters? They had the cheerleader squad, and that was so cool. I was so cool. You
saw the dance, the kitsune dance. Yeah.
Oh, that was so cool. And
so you really watch it, yeah.
Well, you know, I'm friends with the owners of the. I'm friends with the owners. I won't say which team. I'm friends with the owners of a couple sports teams.
Got it.
But one of them, I came back and said, "You guys need to put cute Nekomimi on all your." No, that'd be cat. Kemono mini. Kemono mini. on all your cheerleaders. And they're like, Palmer, that's like weird fetish stuff. I said, no, it's Japanese.
That came from you?
No, I didn't tell the ham fighters.
Okay.
I saw the ham fighters. I came back to the U.S. Met with some U.S. team. I was like, you guys should just copy them. This is great. Everybody loves this. So if and when a U.S. team copies them, you'll know. You'll know who made that happen.
Got it. All
right. Thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you. Awesome.
All right.
Thank you so much.